sound the alarm, blowing the war horns. There's a race problem in America. There's a race problem in America. There has always been a race problem in the United States of America. Since the time of its inception, there has not been a point in its history where race has not played a fundamental role in the structuring and the framing of this society. And unfortunately, Black people have been on the receiving end of some of this assault. Racism is as emblematic of American culture as the red, white, and blue and the Star-Spangled Banner. And it will not end until you make it end. So what is racism? Well, it's two fundamental elements: prejudice plus power equals racism. And it's when a group of people have the power to exercise their prejudice to systematically and adversely impact whole groups of people. So by definition, there's only one group capable of practicing racism in this society. And racism is trauma. And as a result, is transmitted intergenerationally. And Black people are legitimately exhibiting some of the very symptoms associated with traumatic stress injury. The mass enslavement, the mass abduction has resulted in set in motion a series of events and a set of circumstances that has transformed the psychosocial and cultural functioning of African American people. And it continues to exist until this very day. And at the very core of this society, in each and every area of people activity, racism plays a fundamental role at inducing traumatic stress injury within the Black community. So in Lewin's behavioral equation, he speaks and states the fact that all behavior is a function of a person within their environment. So as a clinical social worker and a certified trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapist, I have the privilege of being able to assess, diagnose, and treat behavior and mental health conditions within individuals and within families. And with that information, with that knowledge, with that background, I can also extrapolate it to use it, some of the same concepts, and apply it to groups of people, which is African American people and how they function. So in this brief period of time, you're going to learn some basic information about race-based traumatic stress, as well as pick up some tools that's of value that can help support you in maintaining good functioning mental health. And some of these concepts are going to come to you in a form of the RIP assessment, which is reactive, inactive, or proactive. And this is many different ways in which Black people respond to the trauma that they experience. And if you're familiar with the trauma work or stress work, you know that this may show up as fight, flight, or freeze. And as a result of this transmission across generations, Black people are literally out of their minds. So when you look at some of the dysfunctional interpersonal attachment styles, the maladaptive problem-solving skills, the maladjustment and behavior patterns, the dysregulated emotional drives, counterintuitive coping strategies, perceptual disturbances, illogical thought processing, all of this is indicative of traumatic stress injury, or otherwise known as mental illness. So to some degree, you have been impacted, whether it's on a small level or a large level, but you know in the Black community, you could see a variation of some of these things playing out. Now, in the northeast corner of Africa, there exists in Egypt, along the Nile River in the Aswan Mountains, there lives a particular type of scorpion. It produces a neurotoxin that causes paralysis and arrhythmia in its prey. And within that same ecosystem, there exists a marsh frog that lives closer to the riverbank. So on this particular day, the scorpion wanted to get across the river and is not a good swimmer. So he approaches the frog. He says, "Hey, Mr. Frog, I know you're a good swimmer. Can you please give me a lift to the other side of the riverbank?" The frog says, "No, no, no, no. I know who you are, Mr. Scorpion. And from time immemorial, you have caused death and destruction to my people. So no, I cannot take you." And Mr. Scorpion said, "Come on. Yeah, you're right. But I do have this venom in me, but I truly want to get across. And today I'm not going to sting you. And the frog says, no, Mr. Scorpion, I can't help you. And the scorpion continues and responds back and say, think about it this way. Why would I sting you if I'm asking you to take me across? If I sting you, I will surely cause harm to myself, and we won't make it across. So that wouldn't make sense. And pondering it and contemplating a little further, and against his better judgment, the frog says yes. So the scorpion jumps on his back. They enter the Nile River and they swim across. And the scorpion says, Mr. Frog, you're such a strong swimmer. You're such a fast swimmer. I knew you were the man for the job. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And he continues to swim. And about halfway through the river, the scorpion realizes he didn't eat today. So what do you think he did? Absolutely, he stung him. And frozen in paralysis, as he sinks into the bottom, the frog looks at the scorpion and says, Mr. Scorpion, why did you do that? You lied to me. You told me that you wasn't going to hurt me. You told me you wasn't going to sting me. And the scorpion looks down and says to the frog, Mr. Frog, you knew I was a scorpion from the very beginning, and it's in my very nature to sting you. Now, this is the fundamental condition that Black people find themselves in when it relates to racism in this society. Some of us know that it exists, but they choose to ignore it. They're inactive, they're frozen in time, and they don't want to deal with it. And then there's others who believe that it doesn't exist at all, but they only want to respond to it when something of significance happens. So they're more the reactive type. And then lastly, you have those who know it exists and they take necessary precaution and action. They diligently work day after day in order to reduce the impact and effects and avoid being victimized. These are called the proactive type. So no matter where you find yourself on the spectrum of this racism and trauma, you must understand that you're impacted by it. And in the most fundamental way, stress is one of the most significant problems that causes harm to the body. Now, the body has a natural stress response system. So when you're impacted and exposed to stress, it releases a particular type of hormone known as cortisol. Now, when this hormone is released into the bloodstream and as persistent and consistent as being exposed to race-based stress, it can be toxic. And it can result in physical health problems. It can result in psychological health problems and emotional health problems. So some of the things you may experience are headaches, backaches, respiratory failure, high blood pressure, diabetes. Psychologically, you may experience anxiety, depression, intrusive thoughts, schizophrenia, bipolar, anger and resentment, and social withdrawal. Relationally, you find it difficult to attach. So you're more detached, you're distrustful, you're hypersensitive, you're argumentative, and you're just looking out for your own regard. And you don't have much regard for the other person. Now, you could continue to act as if it doesn't exist, as you could ignore it, it's just going to go away, but that's not going to be the solution. You could try to shop your way out of it. You could try to drink your way out of it. You could try to smoke yourself out of it, sex. That's not going to solve the problem. These are only short-term solutions to a permanent problem. So there's one fundamental thing that Black people, you must do is stop trying to change the nature of the scorpion and change the way you relate to the scorpion. Because some of the dysfunctional ways of adjusting and adapting and coping cause you more health complications. So I want to leave you with this particular area, the 6 critical strategies that's known to support resilience and recovery from trauma. And it comes to you as the form of the 6 critical strategies. And you're going to have free access to it. You could go to it, counseling-support-services.com/our-resources, and you could get a copy, the 6 critical strategies, a transformational self-help workbook, and you could work through some of the areas to look at how you can improve your health and functioning by just making minor modifications in your daily activities. So the first thing you want to be able to do is regulate your dietary intake. Let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. your rest, your sleep-wake cycle. Allow your rest to help you reduce your stress. You want to move your body, stay active, at least 20 minutes a day at minimum. You want to use mindful stress reduction techniques, otherwise known as meditation or prayer, where you sit still and you relate to your creator and analyze what's going on inside of you and outside of you. You also want to pay attention to your relationships. Stay away from toxic people because they make you sick. Lastly, you want to be able to get some coaching or some counseling support to help you transform that trauma into triumph. So pick up the 6 critical strategies, and you can meet me and connect with me on all social media platforms as Taharka Sankara, Taharka Speaks, or Counseling Support Services. Now, each day you have an opportunity to change the course of history, so make today be that day.
Greetings, everyone. As painful as George Floyd's murder was, the nation's response in the months following were highly encouraging. In the months following, we witnessed more resources and energy put into fighting systemic racism than ever before. America experienced its largest running and most sustained protest against racial injustice than it ever has. Many of you listening probably marched or donated to organizations like the NAACP, Black Lives Matter, or some other organization. Corporate America alone donated over $2 billion to fight systemic racism. Unfortunately, the majority of that money remains unspent even today, while the rest was spent on efforts that had little systemic impact. The problem is that most people are clueless about how to actually craft an effective strategy to fight systemic racism. The work can be daunting, and even the most seasoned veterans get overwhelmed at times. This often leads to many to throw their hands up and do the bare minimum, which is to just show up every couple years and vote. Newsflash, voting alone is the floor. However, the strategies that I will lay out today are about reaching the ceiling. My name is Kofi Annan. In 2016, I joined the NAACP. Prior to that, I was just someone who did the bare minimum. The branch that I joined was a small branch located in Northern Virginia that really only managed to attract a handful of members at each meeting. The few active members that were there were so kind of happy to see someone to get some new blood that just a few months after joining, I was elected as the president of the branch, even though I didn't have any actual experience conducting activism and really didn't have a good understanding of even just how the organization itself worked. This should have been a recipe for disaster. And I guess depending on who you ask, in some ways it probably was. But not because we were ineffective. Quite the opposite, actually. We were disruptive to the status quo. But in the end, we managed to get a lot of progress done on a lot of really key issues. And in 2 years, we became not just one of the largest branches in the state of Virginia, but also won the NAACP's highest honor, the Thalheimer Award, for being the best branch in the country. My strategy relied on 5 key principles, which I will discuss today: efficiency, authenticity, impatience, unwillingness to compromise your values, and most importantly, independence from either political party. Principle 1, be efficient. I'd like to start off by telling a brief story. A few years ago, I started a food truck named Soul Rebel. Also, despite not having any experience in the food industry, as you can tell, I'm a risk taker. I had a concept in mind, which was Caribbean American fusion. And I had endless supply of great menu items that I wanted to share with everyone. But to be perfectly honest, the first few outings were kind of a hot mess. The problem was I tried to do too much and tried to please everyone. After a few rough outings, I realized the problem and decided to trim back. And so we scaled back the menu quite a bit, which actually helped efficiency and improved customer service. Racial justice work can evoke similar feelings of trying to do something for everyone, trying to please everyone, because quite frankly, racial injustices can be found everywhere. But all of these issues are complicated, especially if you've never worked or been trained in that particular field or in that particular issue. And it's not enough to just study the issue in a general sense. You also have to understand how it manifests itself in your local community. So, to be effective, you must be efficient. Principle two, be authentic. Once you gain a firm understanding of who you are, the next step is learning how to embrace your authenticity, which is easier said than done. Many of you are familiar with the story of Rachel Dolezal, the white woman who was the president of the Spokane, Washington NAACP, who was pretending to be black in order to, I guess, lend some legitimacy to her leadership. While this represents an extreme example of impersonation, many racial justice activists struggle with this temptation to imitate someone else. It's one thing to look up to the greats, but you are not them. Your story is not their story. Their strengths and weaknesses are not your strengths and weaknesses. And at the end of the day, your goals may not be their goals. You have a unique story and a unique path. Embrace your story and know that your story and what you bring to the table is enough. Principle three, be impatient. In March 2022, Congress passed a law against lynching. This wasn't necessarily led with the great celebration from the African American community that one would imagine. Not because it wasn't important, but it obviously came several decades too late. After all, it took over 100 years and 200 failed attempts to actually pass. And in the meantime, thousands upon thousands of Black people were lynched. Some may view this as a lesson in patience, but it's not. It is instead a lesson in the danger of limitless patience, and yet another lesson as to how poorly our systems are designed to protect the minorities. In this work, patience is a bedfellow of complacency, which is a gateway drug to acceptance. You don't owe anyone an apology for carrying around a chip on your shoulder, and you don't owe anyone an apology for not following protocol, adhering to decorum, or playing nice. Principle four, be uncompromising. Compromise in politics is a good thing, don't get me wrong, but compromising your principles solely for the sake of appeasement is different from finding a common solution with a mutually beneficial end goal, especially when it comes to the pursuit of racial justice. Failing to recognize the difference can lead to accepting inadequate laws and policies that fail to reflect the values and the principles at stake, or worse, needlessly extend the pain and suffering of our people. American democracy is designed to move at a snail's pace, even in the best of times, and not move at all in times of hyperpartisanship. The idea of moving slowly and finding ways to compromise might sound like it's a reasonable approach to governing, and it is effective on most issues. But this approach does little to undo the systemic racism that is ingrained in the fabric of our society. Principle five, there's a saying that goes, in politics, there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests. This couldn't be truer in racial justice. When I was the president of the NAACP, I had an opportunity to run for office, statewide office, which I did. I took up the opportunity, threw my name in a hat, and came up about 117 votes short. However, even though it was a bummer at the time, in hindsight, this was a blessing in disguise. I now realize that had I won, I would have lost some of my autonomy and my ability to fight for what I believe in the unapologetic manner that I believe it should be done. You might be questioning my logic because many people are bought into the idea that politicians reflect, serve, and answer to the people. This is only partially correct. The truth is that politicians answer to the party first, donor second, and the people third. Conversely, activists serve one master, the people affected by the issue they're fighting for. Had I actually won my race, I would have been forced to dilute my agenda to appease the party interests and the party bosses, and be less critical of my peers and party leadership. It would have been a matter been only been would have been a matter of time before I sounded like and even morphed into another mainstream politician towing party lines. So in conclusion, racial justice work is extremely challenging work. But using the strategies I outlined here can help you to create a solid roadmap to success. I hope you found this presentation insightful. If you would like to learn more about the principles that I've outlined here, I urge you to pick up a copy of my book, Leadership in Action, The Five Principles of Racial Justice Advocacy. It's available on Amazon or through our website, 42fightingwords.com. Thank you. God bless.
Hi, my name is Lavonne Nichols, and I am the owner of Say Something Good LLC, where we believe saying something good not only helps, but it heals. And that is why I am so excited to speak with you today on the importance of self-care in the Black community. Have you watched the news lately? Matter of fact, have you watched the news and what's been going on around us over the last 3 years? Well, what's been happening has been a collective traumatic experience. And for many, let's really be honest, it's been a generational traumatic experience for our community. We've seen so much. We've seen our brothers and our sisters being murdered in the streets with videos and images. And so the need to take care of ourselves is greater now more than ever. Self-care basically refers to a person's efforts to maintain their wellness and their health. It's initiated and maintained by each individual based on their own needs because we all process and cope with things in different ways. Self-care requires active engagement and a conscious effort to form new and beneficial habits. When you care for yourself, it helps bring about balance, focus, and mindfulness. And in turn, that helps you to navigate challenging things in your life, like social and political issues that are happening all around us. Self-care not only helps emotionally, but it helps us physically. It's been said that reducing and managing stress can minimize the risk of heart disease and stroke among African Americans. African Americans are 50% more likely to die of a stroke and 30% more likely to die of a heart attack than Hispanics and whites. Life comes with its challenges for everyone. And then to add on racism and prejudice and microaggression, it's even more challenging. That's why I truly believe that self-care is not optional for people of color. It is a non-negotiable habit that we must embrace. Now, let's be honest. We have heard of self-care, and what comes to mind? You see that person in the bathtub with all the bubbles painting their nails. Well, self-care is more than just pampering yourself, but it's about being more intentional with what you do with your time and your energy. Self-care is not about taking on more tasks with your overwhelming schedule as it is, but it's about having healthy self-care habits so that you can do more of letting go than to taking on tasks. The more you rest and take care of yourself, the more you're able to nourish and feed yourself. You will feel so much more capable of showing up in the world the best way that you possibly can. Self-care allows you to maintain a healthy relationship with yourself so that you can take care of your mental health and your well-being. So now that we've talked about the importance of self-care and why it's so important in our community, let's talk about 8 simple ways that we can practice self-care every day. Now, in these 8 areas of self-care, your physical care is critical because the lack in this area can affect all the other self-care categories. In the physical self-care, we're talking about taking care of our physical body because if you are sick all the time, then you're in no position to help yourself or anyone else. So creating a regimen where you have a well-balanced diet, exercising regularly, and getting good amount of sleep for you can boost your energy levels and contribute to your overall quality of life. Some of the ways that you can continue to work on your physical self-care is moving daily. Getting out the house and either working out, walking, or running. It's eating a healthy and nourishing meals that go along with your dietary needs. It's staying hydrated and getting a good amount of sleep, whatever is according to your schedule and what you need for your body to be its best. It's spending time in nature and enjoying sometimes those bubble baths and those showers. All the time, the showers, right? Next, we want to talk about mental self-care. And this is talking about the psychological and cognitive thinking and your mind's ability to understand and process what's happening to it that's happening into this world. And so these type of practices stimulate the mind and improve the brain functionality. It also helps with your perspective and developing your growth mindset. So types of mental self-care. These activities are you learning a new skill, a new language. It's journaling. It's doing a social media detox. I know. It's practicing positive thinking and reading self-help and personal growth books. And it's about setting big intentions as well as small ones. Next, we're going to talk about emotional self-care. Emotional self-care really involves your feelings and learning to understand yourself. It helps you truly love and accept yourself for who you are. It's about developing emotional intelligence, and it allows you to manage the expression of your feelings and ultimately your behavior. Ways to do this is to set healthy and clear boundaries to protect your energy. It's writing down positive affirmations, and it's asking for help when you know that you need it. It's practicing self-love, and sometimes it's getting that good cry out. It's also speaking to a therapist and journaling about your feelings and spending time with yourself with no distractions. Next is emotional self-care. This category talks about creating the right environment for you to work in. And so it's about motivating you and not distracting you. It's about making you feel good and not depressed. And so sometimes that means just clearing off the clutter off your desk. Some other activities are having a morning routine where you're making your bed, or you're really calming the atmosphere in the mornings and the evenings. It's traveling for just a change of scenery, or decluttering your wardrobe regularly. It's heading to a coffee shop to get out of the house to do some work. It's listening to music and exploring somewhere new in your community. Next, we're going to talk about financial self-care. And this is about cultivating a healthy relationship with money. Money can sometimes bring about stress and anxiety to our lives, but we want to change our mindset around money and look at things more positively instead of negatively. And so some of the activities you can do in this is setting financial goals for yourself this year, dealing with debt head on. It's writing down positive affirmations about money. It's downloading apps that will help you keep track of your finances on your phone or your laptop. It's getting some advice from podcasts, social media, and workshops. Next, we're going to talk about social self-care. And it's the step that's talking about building your ability to maintain healthy and interpersonal relationships with others. Social connections help us to feel loved and less alone, but also are essential in developing and improving our social care and activities. So some of these things will include having new professional and personal relationships, hanging out with our friends with no distractions. It's setting clear boundaries. It's limiting our time with negative people. Let's say that again, limiting our time with negative people, sending a message to our friends to say, I love you, I'm grateful for you, and removing toxic relationships from our lives. Next, we're going to talk about recreational self-care. Mainly, that means enjoying life, having fun, taking the opportunity to connect with your inner child and tap into those hobbies that you did when you were young. It's enjoying the moment. And some things you can do are traveling with yourself or with people that you really love to be around. It's pampering yourself. It's also watching Netflix and spending time with people who really you enjoy their company so much so that they add to your life and they make you smile. It's doing that paint and sip or that adult coloring book. And lastly, we're going to talk about spiritual self-care. This category is really about grounding yourself and finding hope and peace despite the challenging situations that you may encounter daily. Spiritual self-care is about nourishing your mind and your body so that you can nourish your soul. And so a few activities are, really trying to silence the outside noise. That's what these activities will do so that you can have that inner calm and peace. Some of those activities include meditating, breath work. They include going to your place of worship and trying out yoga. It means tapping into your core values and dedicating time to reflect and learning about yourself deeper. I have to say this again, self-care is not going to be the same for everyone. Do what works for you. My name is Lavonne Nichols, and I would love to connect with you. You will find a QR code that you can connect with me. Remember to be your own advocate. Realize what you need and be an advocate for yourself. And if you need support with that, make sure you hit me up. I would love to connect with you. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Shailah Edmonds, former international runway model and author of my memoir, Wild Child to Couture Style. Sounds glamorous, right? Well, let me tell you, I persevered through discrimination, rejection, ageism, just to name a few things, to make it to where I am today. Let me tell you how it all started. I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, and I always loved the arts. I wanted to be a singer, a dancer, an actress, but there was no outlets for people of color in Portland. So I rebelled and became a wild child. I hung out with all the wrong people, did all the wrong things, and ended up being a teenage parent. But I finally got my life back together and went back to school. And in college, I met a boyfriend who was from Washington, D.C. And he took me back to Washington, D.C., and we got married, and I had another child. But we were both young and didn't know anything about raising a family or a marriage, and we grew apart, so that marriage didn't last. But I persevered, and I got a job at the telephone company, and I was walking down the street one day on my lunch hour, and I was approached by a lady, I'll never forget her name, Ruth Turner, who told me I was walking so erect and beautiful in the high platform shoes and was so beautiful and thin, and I should be a model. And at that time I had no idea how to even get started to be a model. So she took me to her apartment and gave me training, and she sent me to New York for a model competition. I won the competition, and afterwards I was approached by a lady, an agent, who said if I moved to New York she could help me get started in my career. So I was so excited. I made amends with the ex-husband and to keep the children until I got settled in New York. And when I got to New York, I researched the agent who had promised me to help me get started. And when I went into her office, she says, I don't remember you or telling you that. And at this point, there's nothing I can do for you because we have our quota of black models. Can you believe? So again, I persevered, and I kept taking pictures and seeing agents, hoping that that one picture would get the attention of the right agent. But it never did. I faced endless rejection. But there was one photographer in particular who was so encouraging and was doing all he could to help me. And he kept telling me I should go to Europe. And I had no way of getting to Europe or how to get there. So I went to pick up my pictures one day, and he gave me an envelope, and in that envelope was a one-way ticket to Germany. And being young, without missing a beat, within a week, I was on my way to Germany. I had no fear and was determined to make it. So I get to Germany and I started networking. Everyone I met, I told them I was there trying to be a model and looking for an agent. And I was offered jobs as a maid, to work in a brothel, all these menial jobs. and there was no way I was settling for that. I kept to my standards and was not going to stop until I found an agent. And sure enough, I landed with the top agent in Munich, Germany, and my career began. And work was going well in Germany, but I always felt that there was something more. And when you put that in your head, somehow you will be directed to the right person to take you to that next level. So positive thinking is a lot to do with this. And sure enough, I met these models who told me I should go to Italy because they do the most incredible photography there. So I jumped on a train and went to Milan, Italy, and sure enough, I did the most beautiful pictures I had ever done in my life. And again, after the beautiful pictures were over, everything was quiet again, and I just felt there was something more. So again, I met these models who told me I should go to Paris. They said someone like you would work so well in Paris, you're tall and thin. And sure enough, I got on the train and went to Paris. And although the season was ending, I ended up booking 2 shows. So by this time, I had confidence. Yes, you must have confidence. I had work from Germany, from Italy, and Paris, so I knew New York would accept me now. So I go back to New York, and I see several agents, only to be rejected again. I couldn't believe it. I was done. So I go back to Washington, D.C. and spend time with my family, and something kept gnawing at me and just telling me I had to prove America wrong. So this time I did the research to see when the shows were starting, and I went back to Paris with a vengeance. And before I knew it, I was working for every major designer in the world, all over the world. The timing was just perfect. And that's very important when you're planning your career. Timing is very, very important, so do your research. I even elevated myself to the couture level of modeling, which is rare for a black model to achieve, and I'm so very proud of that. But I tell you, it wasn't all easy. I have to tell you about one casting that I went on because I was actually too tall for a lot of designers, and that's why I wasn't hired for some in the beginning, because the average model was about 5'9½", 5'10" at the most during those days. This was in the mid-'80s. And I lied about my height as well as my age, this, again, before the internet. And I told them that my height was 5'10". And I went to one casting, and this one designer told me that I was too tall for his clothes. I was tired. I'd gone on so many castings that day, and I was tired of hearing that excuse. So I told him, tall models can wear your clothes just as well as short models, and you need some variety in your show. I said, just let me try on one dress. And he was so taken aback, you know the French people. And sure enough, he let me try a dress on. And I walked and twirled and showed that dress like I'd never walked before. And would you believe, me and that dress ended up on the cover of Time magazine. So stand up against that word no. It's a small word, but it carries a huge wallop. So do your research. Ask for a second chance. Don't be afraid to try it again and keep trying. If you really want it, no is just only a word that can be turned into yes. You have the power within you to succeed. And this message is not only for models, but anyone in any walk of life. If you're looking for a new career or a new path in your life, go for it. Persevere. Plan your life. Believe in yourself. Have confidence. Network with different people and people in that area of interest that you have. And most of all, persevere. Don't give up. And you heard it here from the Perseverance Queen. After spending a year living in Paris and establishing myself internationally in the fashion industry, I went back to New York one last time and tried to see the agents again. And the first agent I saw accepted me readily because she had seen my pictures in all the international magazines. And she says, "Why didn't you ever come to New York?" But I didn't get angry. You have to learn to quell your anger in all situations. And before I knew it, I was working for all the major designers in New York. I was able to move my family back to New York, where I live presently. And I worked internationally for the next 5 or 6 years. Very successful. So I hope my story has inspired you. And as I said, it's not only for models, but for people in all walks of life. You have it in you to be successful. No one's going to do it for you. So what are you doing sitting there? Get up, go out, get your life together and start a new career. Good luck.
Saint Laurent, Valentino, Fendi, Gucci, Chanel, Louis Vuitton. Be a sensation.
During one of my most recent visits to the cell phone store, I had something interesting happen that really resonated with me. As most of us know, there's always going to be a season in life where we need to switch over our services or even change devices. During my most recent visit, as I was transferring the data from my Android phone to my new iPhone, I realized something very, very specific that speaks to our topic today. As the data was transferring, I unwittingly stacked the cell phones on top of one another, thinking that it was going to speed up the process of transfer. But what I noticed is that when I moved the cell phones from a side-by-side position to a one in front of the other or a stacked position, it actually slowed the progress. When I put the cell phones directly next to each other, the data transferred almost 10 to 15 times more quickly. I want to talk today about how authentic connection has the power to propel the Black community forward. When I witnessed the transfer of data happen so much more quickly, I realized the same thing happens with us humans. We think that by leading and dominating in aggressive ways that we're actually able to make more impact, while we overlook the power and the impact of walking side by side with one another, amplifying each other's gifts to actually propel each other forward. When we live in a world where we are constantly fighting for power and to feel important, which is something that the Black community does at almost every turn, we may give in to a more controlling and dominant demeanor or controlling and dominating solutions. Very rarely are we looking at the power of partnership and intention to actually propel our communities forward. One of the most important things that's going to help us be able to show up and walk side by side with one another is having a level of personal awareness. When you can honestly observe who you are, how you're showing up, what traumas you're bringing to the table, you are actually then able to see your brother or your sister in community through that same exact lens. Once you're able to see, hey, this is how I'm showing up, this is who I want to be, and this is the path for me to get there, you have to then be willing to change. Without willingness, there will be no progress. Now, oftentimes we may get caught up in competition, we may get caught up in the myriad of issues that we're facing as a Black community, but it cannot be overstated that we have to be willing to solve the problem. We have to be willing to look at ourselves as a part of the solution. Another part is audacity. You have to be bold enough to face the discomfort, the challenges, even the times that you will be called out and be wrong in a situation in order to produce change on a greater level in our community. When we realize that it's okay to compromise, it's okay to be right, and it's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to be neutral in situations, but there's a level of boldness and audacity that we have to persevere through those challenges and through those hard times. In order to understand what it is we're seeing and the challenges that are laid out, the systems that we're seeking to change, we have to have knowledge. We have to be willing to expose ourselves to new processes, new ways of thinking, new information that will help us grow as individuals and that will ultimately help our community at large grow. If we are intentionally seeking out new information, we're able to expand our current perspective. And when we expand our current perspective, we're able to not only grow as individuals, but we're able to teach our loved ones in our family and our community members so that the growth becomes exponential. Experiences. One of the things that plagues the Black community is our lack of diverse experiences. When you consider the impact of international travel or traveling outside of your city and state, anyone that travels will tell you just how impactful it was in broadening their perspective, their worldview, and how they actually think about life and interact with others, other people outside of their cultures, other people within their culture that might actually just have a different life experience. When we intentionally experience people, places, and things outside of our comfort zone, it opens up a world of opportunity in terms of how we relate to one another, the empathy that we have towards one another, and our ability to truly, authentically connect with one another. Never give up. Once you choose growth, life is going to come and test your gangster. I do not want to mislead you and make you feel that once you choose to grow, to evolve, to be the one that decides to grow your community in a certain way, to be the one that puts your stake in the ground and says enough is enough and it stops with me, that life then becomes a bed of roses and peaches. Life will absolutely come to test your gangster. But it's up to you to have the level of determination, to never give up, to stay committed to the vision of seeing our Black community thrive. Once you are committed to that, we will then be able to see just how great of an impact we can have and the ripple effect within our community. It takes knowledge, audacity, commitment to grow and cultivate the health that our community needs to be propelled forward. Once we decide that our community comes first, the health and wellness of our community comes first, and we are taking a step towards connecting with others in our community, we'll begin to see collaboration. We'll begin to see synchronicity. We'll begin to authentically see communities form of like-minded folks that are maybe surrounded in finance, maybe health and wellness, maybe it's parenting or maternal health. And when we're working together as a collective with a strong, cohesive mind, with the goal in mind of the ultimate uplifting of health and wellness in the Black community, we will be propelled forward. But it takes everyone. It takes each of us choosing to start with ourselves, to make an indelible mark. It takes each of us deciding that we are going to authentically connect first with ourselves, connect then with our families, and then move forward to connecting with our community in a way that the ripple expands throughout the entire Black community at large and the Black diaspora. Now you may be asking, listen, Jackie, I hear you, but authentic connection is so hard when we have all of these years of trauma that we're processing through. And believe you me, I totally understand. But again, it's gonna boil down to commitment. What is your legacy worth to you? What are you worth to yourself? I would posture that the greatest gift from understanding authentic connection is the authentic connection that you will develop with yourself. Once you develop that authentic connection with yourself and you feel how grounded and sure you are, and you build that connection with your family, it will become that much easier to build those authentic connections with your community. We don't have to be afraid of being hurt or stabbed in the back and all the traumas that we do deal, that are very real issues in the Black community. But we will be so sure of ourselves and so committed to this work that we will show up, even when it feels unsafe, for the betterment of the health and wellness of the entire Black community. My name is Jacquelyn Clemmons, and I thank you for your time. You can follow me on IG at I am Jacquelyn Clemmons. If you'd like to reach out to me directly via email, you can reach out at info@delaluzwellness.com. I am an author, I'm a birth worker, and I am a creative entrepreneur. I truly believe that connection every step of the way is one of the simplest and greatest solutions to propelling our Black communities further. So I hope that you will join me in this revolutionary yet simple aspect of changing how we each show up day to day for ourselves, for our family, and for our community. Thank you for listening.
With all that is happening in the day-to-day, there are many of us that feel beat down emotionally as well as physically. With the racism levels that exist at this moment around the world, it can feel as though we have stepped through a portal and bounced back in time. This time in the United States is reminiscent of the Jim Crow era. The posted signs are missing, but the undertones are there. What we as Black people need to remember is that we are the descendants of greatness. Our enslaved ancestors endured unimaginable atrocities. Many lives were lost, but many also survived. They believed in love, marriage, and family, despite their enslaved circumstances. They often endured heartbreak due to being sold off from each other by their enslavers. They form the foundations by which we have the intelligence and fighting spirit that we as a people have today. Were that not true, we as their descendants would not be here. We continue to fight, continue to walk their path, and continue to not be silenced. During Black History Month, we often hear discussions on the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Incorporated in that are his amazing efforts and accomplishments during the Civil Rights Movement. Rarely do they discuss how brilliant he was prior to becoming the civil rights legend that he is today. Prior to the song, prior to the holiday, prior to the memorial, Dr. King skipped 2 grades in high school and was accepted into Morehouse College at the age of 15. By the age of 26, he earned a PhD. He put in the effort, and it took him down a path that created the man the world came to know. Dr. King was murdered in 1968. He was a descendant of greatness. There were so many others that put it all on the line for what they believed in. Just to mention a few, George Wesley Lee was a leader in the NAACP, as well as the vice president of the Regional Council of Negro Leadership in Mississippi. He was murdered in 1955. Dr. Thomas Hensey Brewer was instrumental in the Civil Rights Movement and co-founder of the NAACP chapter in Georgia. He was murdered in 1956. Medgar Evers was another prominent leader in the Civil Rights Movement and the NAACP. He was murdered in 1963. Malcolm X, another brilliant man that gave it all. Whether you're a fan or not, he gave everything for his people. He was murdered in 1965. Fred Hampton was an amazing young 21-year-old leader in the Black Panther Party. He was murdered in 1969. Again, he was 21 years old. They were all descendants of greatness. I mention these men not only because of their sacrifices, but because we owe them to say their name. We owe them to know who they are. We owe them because we are their descendants. All of our ancestors deserve to be honored and remembered. Everything that they fought for was not for them. It was for us. Without their victories, there would be no foundation for us to stand on today. I believe that we carry our ancestors and their life experiences with us. I think it's weaved in us just like DNA. I often say their yesterday created our today. Black people have made significant contributions in various areas to the world. Many of their creations have been stolen and credit given to others. Many of their contributions are simply hidden. It's only been since 2016 that the world found out about the 1960s Black mathematician queens of NASA, Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson. The world still needs to know about the genius Frank Calvin Mann. He was the top engineer for the famous billionaire businessman and aviator Howard Hughes. Frank Mann received royalties from General Motors for the original designs of the Black Buick LeSabre and the Chevy Corvette. His list of hidden accomplishments is lengthy, but most have never even heard his name. The world has been introduced to the story of the fearless Tuskegee Airmen. The highly decorated World War II fighter pilots were once hidden as well. What isn't as commonly known are the many other Black military regiments of men and women that were brave and also highly decorated for their service. Oh, and it was just last year in 2022 that the world officially found out how Elvis Presley became the legend that he is today. His early Black influences gave him his foundation for his music and those moves. There's so much unknown Black history that we all are in a historical drought. Black history is American history. Adding censorship to Black history in schools is not the answer. It is what it is. We need to be diligent in learning what we don't know. We need to enlighten our minds because most of what we've been taught about our history is just plain wrong. The rest of it is just plain missing. In order to pass down our history, definitely with accuracy, to our children and our grandchildren, we must put in the work. We have to do the research. We have to pass this on. The future Black leaders of the world need us to seek out this information. You cannot expect to not repeat the errors of the past if you don't know what the past is. Just imagine this. Enslavers did not consider Black people to have souls. They invented almost everything that is still in use today, but yet our ancestors were definitely not considered intelligent. Definitely can't say that they were lazy when they worked for free for nearly 400 years in the United States, South America, and the Caribbean, but yet they were considered lazy by their enslavers. Not having souls is out. Black people have a rich history of faith and religion that reaches back to our ancestors. All of that is why, from the past to the present and the future, there will be representations of Black excellence. Why? Because we're all descendants of greatness. The sooner that we as a people understand and believe that, the sooner we can move forward. We have to look back in order to be able to understand our present and be able to look forward to our future. our children, our children's children, their children. We have many generations that are depending on us to get it right because it's been wrong for so long. It's time for us to understand our purpose as a people in this day, in this time, in this present. We need to come together. We need to share what we know. We need to stop holding on to information because we're afraid to let it go. We're afraid to tell these stories and this information so that we have this accuracy that we need when it comes to our history. And let us not do what has been done in the past. There are some of our ancestors that did take things with them to the grave. Let's share what we know so that we know exactly what has happened in order for us to prevent it from happening again, especially the negatives, especially the atrocities. We need to get it right so that we can say we did it, we did our best, we did what we were supposed to do. And that way we can create this foundation that our children and our grandchildren and our great-great-grandchildren can stand on and move forward with.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will be able to one day grow up in a nation where they are not judged by the color of their skin, but by their character. Dr. Martin Luther King said that. And he also said that they should have an equal chance in getting a slice of the economic pie being served. Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream, he had a vision, he had a mission. You have a dream, a vision, and a mission. And it might be to be a successful and prosperous entrepreneur. Just like the entrepreneurs, the Black entrepreneurs on Greenwood Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which we all know today as Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street was one of the wealthiest Black communities in the United States. They were not just rich in wealth, they had culture, they had heritage. They were able to develop a society within their own economy. Not only did they own their own land, but they had 5 hotels, 31 restaurants, 8 doctor offices, 2 movie theaters, 24 grocery stores, and a list goes on. And for almost 20 years, they thrived in their own community until someone came and put a lid on them. On May 31st, 1921, everything changed. Tragedy struck. Hundreds of people died. Homes were destroyed, along with years of Black success. But what happened in 1921, it is still relevant today. That has left a stigma in our Black communities that if we were ever tried to get larger than what we were, if we ever tried to build on our own, this is what happens. These ops, they came up into this community, destroying everything off of a big white lie and a cold heart. All they did was cause disparities amongst Black people, Black entrepreneurs, and the failure in their businesses. Don't get me wrong. Yes, we do have Black businesses today that are rising each and every day, but we still have to deal with the barriers that have been set for us, causing difficulties in us getting funding, building communities that are supportive, and maintaining a wealthy mindset. Majority of Black entrepreneurs today are struggling with one of 3 things: funding, networking, or their mindset. So what are you struggling with? 44% of Black owners use their own cash to fund their businesses. And only 1% actually gets a loan within the first year. And for the others, they don't even try because they're too discouraged and in fear of being declined. So yes, economic inequality is a pervasive issue in the United States, but that does not have to be your story. There was a man by the name of O.W. Gurley. He started Black Wall Street. He bought 40 acres of land, built a few businesses on it, and then he partnered and collaborated with another like-minded Black individual named John the Baptist Stratford. And they came together, took everything that they had, collaborated with each other and with the community, and helped others do the same. Black Wall Street's dollars circulated 36 to 100 times. Their money stayed in their community for almost a year before it left the community. Whereas for us today, our money lasts 6 hours in our community. Enough time for you to go to the bank, cash your check, and go to Walmart. So what's standing in your way? Is it your mindset? There was an experiment called the sand flea experiment. So what happened was that a scientist took a bunch of fleas, put them in a jar, and left the jar open. The fleas started jumping out the jar, jumping out. And the scientists, of course, that's what they're going to do because they're designed to do that. So the scientists took and put a lid on the jar, put the fleas back in the jar, put the lid on the jar. And he noticed that as they were jumping, they were hitting their head at the top of the lid, falling back down to the bottom of the jar, hitting the head on the top of the lid. And then he left it for a couple hours, came back, and he noticed that the fleas were now jumping below the lid. They were no longer hitting their heads. So the scientists took off the lid, and the fleas continued to only jump below the level of the lid. Now, they have now adjusted how high they jump based on the limitations that they had in that jar. And you know the interesting part about that? The flea's offspring automatically came out and did not jump higher than their parents. They stayed jumping at the same level that their parents jumped. And when the scientists took the lid off the jar, do you know that they stayed in the jar? They never ever escaped to their freedom. Does that sound familiar? Like many entrepreneurs today, you limit yourself to what you see, what you're taught, and who you spend your most time with. Now that becomes your reality. So are you living like a sand flea? Because if you are living like a sand flea, it's time for you to jump out that jar. We've lost our way for far too long. So you may ask yourself, well, how did they do it back then? Something called social capitalism. It's kind of like networking. When I first started real estate, I was excited. Nobody can tell me anything because I was an open book, fresh out of school. And one day, my mentor said, Juanita, it's time to take calls. And I'm like, take calls? Who am I going to call? I don't know anybody. So he was like, go through your phone log. So I'm scrolling through my phone log, looking at people, and I'm saying, oh, this person doesn't have no credit. Oh, that person, I ain't talked to them in a long time. Oh my goodness. I know they ain't got no money. I said, I don't have anybody to call. So I'm starting to panic. My mentor was like, nah, Juanita, you do know people. How many people do you know? And I said 5. And he said 5 people. I said, yeah, that's how many I know. That's who I talk to every single day. And 2 of them are realtors, and we already know the same people. So I don't have nobody. And he was like, you know more than 5 people. Don't limit yourself to your family and your friends. Who do they know? What about your neighbor, your mailman, your hairdresser? And he said, when you do reach out to them, don't talk to them about real estate. Ask them how are they doing, what they've been up to, and how you can serve them. And at that moment, I was like, whoa, why you ain't tell me this like 12 months ago? I went out, did exactly what he said, and I came back with my first contract. See, what we fail to realize is that Black Wall Street entrepreneurs, they didn't have to ask anybody outside of the community for help. They went to each other. They worked together. They supported each other's businesses. They didn't miss an opportunity because they felt like they were introverts or that they had to do it by themselves. We go through life in today's time always thinking that we got to build everything by ourselves. We got to raise our kids by ourselves. We got to build a business by ourselves. And you don't have to do that. So how can you grow your business? How can you fix your mindset? How can you connect with more people? How can you restore, rebuild, and recreate the Black dollar like the Black business owners in Tulsa, Oklahoma? I got 3 easy and actionable takeaways that will help you leave this place and go and transform your life and your business. If you have trouble with funding, the first thing I want you to do is to take inventory on what you have. You got to know what you want. You got to know what you need, and you got to know what you already have to get started. Consider bartering, affiliate marketing, and investments like your 401k to bootstrap your business. If you are in a whirlwind of negative thoughts and mindset, it's time for you to take the limits off. It's time for you to jump out that jar. It's time to learn, unlearn, and relearn. I encourage you to read at least 2 books a month. Start with self-help books, personal development, or a skilled book. And if you are one of those type of people that say, I am an introvert, I don't like talking to people, I got something for you too. Social capital is how the Black business owners survived back then. That's how they thrived for almost 20 years. It's time for you to get out of your comfort zone. Go out, love, serve, give, and add value to someone else first. It's as simple as that. Join a club. Go to somebody's post. Start liking, sharing, commenting. It starts with the simple things first. Start collaborating. And you will see your business grow as well. My name is Juanita Walker, #1 visionary developer.
Welcome. Okay, this is my sermon on the mic, part 1. Time and chance happen to them all, is the title of this talk, and the overall is rising to the occasion. So we're going to talk about rising to the occasion. So my disclaimer, and I'm going to be, for the first half of this talk, we're going to be going directly from my book. Please pass the mic. This is my story. These are my Psalms. And again, this is the sermon on the mic. Okay, so my disclaimer. By definition, a sermon is a talk on a religious or moral subject, especially one given during a church service and based on a passage from the Bible, a lecture. Obviously, I'll be reading from my book, not the Bible. This particular lesson or discussion, rising to the occasion, is going to be taken from the scripture from Ecclesiastes 9:11. And it reads, I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise or wealth to the brilliant or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. Many are familiar with the misquoted version of the scripture, to the ones who endure. However, if you get an understanding of the scriptures in its fullness, you can see the true testament to endurance. The message becomes twofold. First, it's about taking responsibility for every action and reaction, and then it's about knowing how to lead your wounded soldiers when you are at your weakest, helping them to rise up and fight on with death and destruction all around them. It is the idea that in weakness, you can find the strength to help someone else rise up. We all fall. The question is, will we get up? Then will we help the others who have fallen? Will we, who are called strong, help the weak, even if we are broken? In the season of mourning, will we rise? Who amongst the woke will rise to the occasion? We chase dreams. We fulfill goals only to set greater ones. Some of us succeed after many failed attempts, yet something about the end game keeps us playing this game called life. Win, lose, or draw, we tie the knots and become entangled in it, and it becomes us. We chase it, this illusion of success, only to come down from the high. Sometimes the only thing that stops us from chasing these dreams and successes is the tragedies of life, and even more awful and jaw-dropping, the reality of death. The burn reminds us of how out of control we truly are, and only our feelings and relationships are real. Our emotions, when confronted with calamity, become uncontrollable. When we fall to our knees, first in pain and in mourning, and then in prayer, we ask why, and then for the strength to go through. You want to get high. Sobering is the stench of death. Suddenly, the daily grind gets set aside. Then after we go through the motions, we get back up and we reassess what really matters. Is it the dreams that we are chasing or the legacy that we leave? The stories that we tell, the book recipes we pass down from generation to generation, closing those gaps and breaking those curses? We keep the photo albums that tell the stories. Tomorrow's not promised, so we know that every day is made to count. Now, when we fall down on our knees begging to know why, we stop and we dry our own tears and we rise up and we live. We live on for those who live no more. We step into these gaps where our brothers and sisters have fallen. We help and we aspire to rise, right? We aspire to rise to each and every occasion. We know that each time that we win a small battle, it prepares us and strengthens us. We leave a legacy, and every time another person speaks good, we leave a legacy every time another person speaks goodness on our names. It ensures that we are written in an eternal book of life, no matter how big or small our chapter. When we feel weak, we remember that there are generations of people in the future depending on the actions that we are willing to take right now. Will you rise to the occasion? Will you rise to each and every challenge that the Most High puts before you, knowing that your only reward may very well be in the hereafter? Will you keep going like Mama Moses told us? If you know that today they won't sing your praises, yet tomorrow when this life is no more, your name and truth lives on forever. Is this enough right now? Can you, will you rise to the occasion? Again, from Please Pass the Mic. This is my story. These are my Psalms. So, okay, that's the first half. So, will you rise to the occasion? Now, I do have my notes here, but we're going to go frank and have a talk, right? Continuing the rising to the occasion. So I have my notes here and I will be referring to them. First of all, the first thing we have to do is we have to put our haters on silent, okay? Don't listen to anything that a hater has to say. Reject their calls, texts, messages, reject them. Yeah, this is what you do. You combat hate with self-love, right? And again, the main thing you don't want to do is be a self-hater. Okay, you have to deal with the enemy versus the inner me and those inner thoughts that are reflecting self-hate. Okay, so we're going to talk about what self-love looks like versus what self-hate looks like. Let's start off with what self-hate looks like. Self-hate looks like doubt. It looks like insecurity, right? It looks like jealousy. It looks like envy. That's what self-hate looks like. Check yourself. Now let's talk about what self-love looks like. Self-love looks like self-awareness. Self-love looks like self-acceptance. Self-love looks like self-care. When we talk about self-care, we're talking about your medical care, your dental, oral care. You're talking about your mental health care. Okay. That's what self-love looks like. What else does it look like? We're gonna elaborate on this self-love. Okay. Self-love looks like getting a makeover. Okay. And again, when I talk about getting a makeover, it can be just a life hack overall, a complete, let's do something different for the rest of my life. It can be a simple change of hairstyle, haircut. Again, when we're dealing with our health and awareness, a makeover can be anything. You figure it out. Okay. And that's what I say in my notes. Figure it out. Figure out what this makeover might look like in all extremity or just minor things that you need to change and tweak. Right. And don't hesitate. Just do it, because that's what self-love looks like. Self-love looks like I'm going to take care of all these things. I'm going to check myself. If I need some therapy, I'm going to check into therapy. I'm going to make sure that I'm okay. Okay, again, self-love. Let's elaborate some more on self-love and what it looks like. It looks like a spa day. It looks like dating yourself. It looks like opening yourself up to dating. It looks like putting yourself first. Okay, after all these years of not being able to, that's what it looks like. It looks like having friend dates and play dates. Okay, so let's deal and delve in this self-love thing. Okay, because you need to take care of yourself so that you can always be ready to be of service to others. Okay, and I'm gonna close this talk up with this here. I have a few notes, and I just want to make sure I get through these in the next minute. Write your vision. Okay. No matter what life brings, stay focused. Take time outs. Know that everybody makes mistakes. Everybody fails. Be willing to stay focused and get back up and get back on track. Okay. Seek help. If you need help on anything, like I said, with mental health and your health, seek help. Seek help on your projects. Okay. I wanted to say, remember that you should not be the smartest person in your circle. Okay. The best person, the best. If that is, expand your circle or exit your circle. If you are the smartest, brilliant, the best in your circle, expand your circle or exit your circle if you want to get better. Okay. And last and most importantly, ask the Most High to walk with you on this journey as you rise. Thank you.